Welcome back. I will be your presenter for this video. In this video, we will explore the potential of a broader role for the private sector, business, and industry to scale up new sanitation economy systems and markets. We will review how a broad range of business sectors are impacted by poorly managed water, sanitation, and hygiene, or WASH as the acronym most commonly used. In addition, the increasingly relevant business case for engaging industry in the sanitation economies. So why should businesses across sectors care about sanitation? Well, businesses employ millions of workers who also need access to safely managed sanitation at work and at home. The 3.6 billion people that still do not have access to safely managed sanitation are also the employees and workers in the supply chains of large companies, or they are living in communities where large businesses' supply chains are operating. If workers and their families do not have access to safely managed sanitation at work or at home, they may fall ill often. If workers are not able to work because they're often sick, it directly affects business productivity and the ability to source raw materials that are critical to the business. These factors present a compelling business case for investment. For example, a high majority of low-income households in Africa work in agriculture. They are part of the supply chains of large agribusinesses, food and beverage companies. Providing safely managed sanitation in fields or rural work camps is particularly challenging, especially if we're only considering flush toilets and sewer systems. If they do not have access to safely managed sanitation while working or at home, they can fall sick, missing many days of work, which means that the employer company gets less supplies of raw materials that are critical to their business. What if the workers in the field had access to a reinvented toilet with in-situ sewage treatment instead? For example, the container-based sanitation toilet that you learned about in Module 2. And what if the sewage from workers on the plantation was upcycled via circular sanitation into organic fertilizer for the plantation? And to go one step further, new toilet and circular sewage treatment systems were digitized so that they could be remotely monitored to ensure they're being safely managed. These new toilet economy sanitation systems should be in demand from agricultural plantations as a solution for a business-critical problem. Another industry example where workers are particularly affected by lack of access to safely managed sanitation are garment factory workers. A high majority of low-income households in Asia work in garment factories, and the workers are predominantly women. They are part of the supply chains of large textile businesses and clothing brands. Garment factories in Asia have been criticized heavily for their poor conditions for workers, who are predominantly women, including lack of access to safely managed sanitation. If they do not have access to safely managed sanitation while working or when they are at home, they can fall sick, missing many days of work. This means that the clothing company gets suboptimal production, which is critical to their business. What if the workers in the factory had access to a reinvented toilet with access to feminine hygiene products and services? For example, the Toilets for Her community toilet model that you learned about in Module 2. And applying a full sanitation economy mindset, what if the new toilet and circular sewage treatment systems were digitized so that they could be remotely monitored to ensure they're being safely managed? These new toilet economy sanitation systems should be in demand from garment factories as a solution for a business-critical problem. Lack of access to safely managed water, sanitation, and hygiene for workers directly affects company reputations, trust, and license to operate. In the 1990s, Nike, the famous sports clothing and shoe brand, was criticized by NGOs for the conditions of workers in the garment factories in their supply chains, which came to be known as sweatshops. This expose seriously hurt the reputation of Nike as a trusted brand, which has had a direct impact on consumer sales. This negative exposure cost Nike and other clothing brands a significant amount of revenue, but even more in reputational and license to operate costs. In 2022, CDP, the NGO that surveys companies on their corporate responsibility and sustainability risks, reported that the cost of companies' risk exposure from poorly managed sanitation in their supply chains was as high as $6 billion per year amongst just 10 global companies. These examples and others have forced many global companies to review the operations of their supply chain companies and invest more to improve conditions for workers, including access to safely managed sanitation. In 2016, many large corporate brands formed a coalition called Wash for Work, with NGO experts on water, sanitation, and hygiene. These companies wanted to learn more about how best to invest in the highest standards of water, sanitation, and hygiene access for their workers, and to advocate for more businesses to also invest in ensuring water, sanitation, and hygiene access in their supply chains. This study, released in 2018, articulated a new best practice standard and expectations for water, sanitation, and hygiene access for workers in supply chains, including a guide for business implementation and measurement of financial return on investment. Global Wash NGO WaterAid followed the company's progress and found that corporate investments in wash in factories and fields or agricultural plantations was not a cost to the business, but instead delivered financial returns in the form of increased productivity, reduced absenteeism, reduced attrition, and reduced costs for medical expenses. In addition, NGOs have found that access to safely managed water, sanitation, and hygiene builds people's resilience to climate change through increased water security and the ability to manage climate change impacts such as flooding or drought conditions. You will learn more about the importance of climate change for sanitation in the bonus Module 7. With increasing evidence of the risks to business continuity and growth when sanitation is poorly managed, many more global companies are committing to investments in water, sanitation, and hygiene for workers in their supply chains and in the communities where workers live. This slide shows the companies who are leading on this effort. As you can see, these are big companies with large supply chains of workers. As many global companies look for new sanitation solutions for their workers, this presents an excellent opportunity to scale up new sanitation systems, economies, and markets for workers across corporate supply chains. As large businesses also prioritize value creation, the principles of the sanitation economies should be very closely aligned. Thank you for watching.